Hello, today I've got a find for once which is not pottery. I tend to be more interested in finding pottery on the foreshore. Obviously if I see something that isn't pottery, small metal find or bone, then I would pick it up. But generally I'm not actively looking for it. There are two different ways of searching on the Thames Foreshore. You can either walk along fairly briskly and you're spotting larger things like pieces of pottery, for example, or you can choose an area where there are small nails or pins showing on the foreshore, and you can get down on your knees and look with intense detail for a long time in these areas, and there you are more likely to find the small metal finds such as coins and tokens, lace ends and things like that. Also, I'm eyes only, I don't use a metal detector. But recently I spotted this on the Thames Foreshore. First of all I noticed that, which was obviously man-made, so I picked it up, and then a few inches away, the other half, it's broken in half. I could tell it was bone. I thought it was some sort of small pulley, so I posted a short video of it on one of the Thames mudlarking sites, and it was quickly identified as a very interesting find. So it is actually the revolving nut from a medieval crossbow. So it's very exciting to find something easily identifiable from a medieval weapon, especially one as feared as the crossbow was in medieval times. So where would this sit in the mechanism of a crossbow? Well, here we have a fine example of a medieval crossbow. And obviously the bolt will fit along this flat bit here. But here is the revolving nut. If I just zoom in on that a little bit, you can see the shape of it there with the two sort of elliptical cutouts and the revolving thing there. So just bear that in mind as we look at the item itself. So here is the crossbow revolving nut that I found. Let's have a look at it in more detail and the diagnostic features of it. You saw the whole crossbow just now, so the flat bed of the crossbow would go along here, and this would sit in the surface, with this bit being proud above the surface of the crossbow. It's quite an intricate design. It's quite a nice bit of medieval engineering. It has to be quite well engineered to work. It's bone, it could be antler as well. You can see the structure where it's weathered away, where it's been eaten away by the time it's spent either covered or half covered on the foreshore over the centuries. But what you do is it's fixed in place through these two holes there, which have a short two bolts which would hold it in place but allow it to revolve in that way. Then it's got this channel here, and you can just see the head of an iron wedge that has been placed in there. More about that later. So the crossbow bolt itself would sit in, better get it round this way. The crossbow bolt, or quarrel as it was known, would sit in the groove there. And then it's very noticeable on this side. On the other side it's weathered away a lot, but there is a groove there which is not quite semicircular. It's slightly off being semicircular, more elliptical. So you draw your bowstring back, and then it is hooked in there, which holds it in place, and then your bolt is resting there. And then underneath, again, it's quite weathered there, but there is, if we open it up, it's quite interesting that it's broken, so you can see the internal workings of it quite nicely. There's this wedge, an iron wedge, which is wider there and narrows down to a little sort of nail point there, and that would have been proud of the circular form there to form part of the trigger mechanism. So once you've drawn your bow back and it's clipped onto there, bowstring back on clipped onto there, rested your quarrel along the channel there, and then you squeeze your little trigger, which will just hook in there under that iron wedge, and revolve your nut, and ping, off your bow goes towards your enemies or towards a stag that you are hunting. Here is a nice drawing of the trigger mechanism of a crossbow. Slightly different design to the one I found, but you can see the principle there. So there is the trigger, which engages against the little metal wedge there, which will revolve the nut and release the bowstring and release the bolt to be fired at your enemies. These pictures of an actual medieval revolving nut from a German museum, which is in better condition than the one I found in London, shows it very well. So there is the two little ears that hold the bowstring with the slot in between them for the bolt, and here on the other side you can see more clearly the wedge with a little indentation below it just to engage the trigger for revolving the nut and releasing the bolt. So an interesting find, and it's always fun to do the research into it. So I had a look at crossbows as a weapon. They were known from ancient times, very popular in the medieval period, different from the longbow. Now the longbow takes more skill and strength to use, more training perhaps, and has a longer range, but the crossbow also takes some skill to use, and it's a very, very fine piece of engineering. It has to be very, very finely engineered tolerances. If it's too stiff, then it will be inaccurate because you have to squeeze the trigger too hard when you fire your bolt, and too slack obviously, and then your bolt fires off when you don't want it to, and you end up killing Richard II or something disastrous like that. So a very interesting weapon, generally used on the continent more than it was in England here. We tended to prefer the longbow, but there are records of crossbowmen mentioned in this country. For example, they are mentioned in the Magna Carta in a rather dismissive way, the barons demanding that when the war has finished, that the foreign crossbowmen who are infesting the land would be sent home. The crossbow fell out of use in military terms in the 16th century, being overtaken by the development of firearms, but still continued to be popular for hunting among the aristocracy right beyond that period. So it's difficult to date because, being a functional item, the design didn't change much over the years. But I would think it's probably a late medieval item that we have here. When I found it, I said it was in two parts. It was also covered in concretion. The iron wedge had attracted concretion, which happens in marine environments and on the foreshore as well, which I think has exploded this item into two parts. It wouldn't have originally been two parts. It would have been a solid, heavy lump of antler or bone. But it's interesting in a way. It's a shame that that's happened, but it does reveal the internal workings of the wedge, which is quite interesting. I've managed to clean the concretion off it. So yeah, it's a very interesting and unexpected find, and I learnt a lot. I had no idea when I picked it up. I didn't take a picture of it when I found it. Also, my phone had run out of charge because I'd taken far too much video on the foreshore that day already. But I have got a video earlier in the day of the area where I found it, so I'll just show a little clip of that at the end so you can see where it turned up on the foreshore. But I will be recording it on the Portable Antiquities scheme. I had a look on the Portable Antiquities scheme, and there are no other revolving nuts from medieval crossbows recorded in this country, so it's a first as far as that's concerned. So thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more videos from the Thames Foreshore. Medieval history that we can pick up here.